Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our next presenter, Elena Botto. She's an award-winning researcher who's been working with next-generation human brain imaging since 2014. Her thesis was awarded the Institute of Physics Medical Physics Group PhD Prize, and she's been the lead author in many of the seminal papers which have led to the neuroscience community considering wearable technology as a viable alternative to the current state of the art. She's pioneered the construction of a unique wearable neuroimaging system that can record brain activity while a subject moves, something unimaginable with conventional devices. She's a director of Circa Magnetics, a newly established company whose aim is to commercialize neuroimaging systems based on the research that she's been involved with. And I'm delighted to introduce her to Quantum Tech. Elena, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Amit, for the invitation. And well, thank you everyone that is watching this live, especially those that are in the UK and haven't decided to go to the pub instead to celebrate the easing of lockdown. So yeah, today I will talk about mainly the research that I've been involved in for the past years, and introducing also, as Amit has said, Circa Magnetics that has been recently established to commercialize the technology that we've been developing in Nottingham. So yes, this is an overview of the talk. I will introduce the major challenges of neuroscience and neurology currently. In particular, I will talk about the technology that I've been working with, which is called MEG. It's a brain imaging technology called magnetoencephalography, or MEG for short. I will talk about the current limitations of conventional MEG systems that are already based on quantum technologies, but how can this be replaced and improved with new technology? And we'll go through some of the example applications and experiments and demonstrations that we've been carrying out with the system, and finish off talking about Circa Magnetics. So there are many challenges in neuroscience and neurology. I will outline some of these. So, for example, epilepsy. Many people worldwide suffer from epilepsy, and it's a severe neurological disorder that results from abnormal electrical activity that occurs in the brain. It is extremely debilitating. Patients suffer seizures, and only 60% of cases are well controlled with pharmacological intervention. But in some cases, it's needed to resect a part of the brain responsible for this abnormal electrical activity. Another challenge, for example, schizophrenia. One in every 100 people suffer from this, which is it's also severe and debilitating disorder that results from impaired perception of reality. And many of the symptoms that patients have are not very well controlled by drugs. And this leads to an impaired quality of life. Another example, mild traumatic brain injury. So many people are admitted to hospital after having had a concussion, and more than half of the people will develop some symptoms after this, but there's not an objective assessment for diagnosis of mild traumatic brain injury. again, talking about mental health, 1 in 4 people will suffer from a mental health condition at some point in their lifetime, but there's still very little that we know from what underlies, what are the neural substrates that underlie these conditions, and there are not effective treatments available. Another example, dementia is again another challenge, and in an aging population is something, it's growing markedly, but still there is very little that we know from what are the substrates about neurodegeneration, and also very little is known about how the brain develops. So what happens in the brain? What are the brain changes from when we are born? We learn to walk, to talk, to develop all these skills, and what happens with the brain, those changes throughout from childhood into adulthood, and how it declines with all age. So understanding how the brain works and how we can treat brain disorders is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in this century. So I'm going to talk about brain imaging and what its role is, and in this area. So many of the brain disorders, the brain structure looks apparently normal. So imaging techniques like MRI or X-ray CT that give very high precision images of the brain, of structural brain information. They are not giving us the full information. So sometimes we need to look at the brain function, not only its structure. So there are techniques like functional MRI, PET, electroencephalography, amongst others, that are functional brain imaging technologies. And for example, functional MRI and PET, that they look at metabolism. So they assess brain function, but indirectly. So they're not looking at brain electrophysiology directly. Therefore, they lack of temporal resolution. Whereas electroencephalography, or EEG, that is commonly used, it gives access to electrophysiology in the brain with really good temporal resolution. But as a downside, it gives very poor spatial resolution because of its low sensitivity, provided that the scalp and anything between the brain and the scalp where we put the electrodes is not conductive, so we lose sensitivity there. So I'm going to be focusing on a technique called MEG, or magnetoencephalography. So MEG measures the magnetic fields that are generated by current flow in the brain. So like any electrical current, neurons fire current, and this creates a magnetic field that we can pick up with an array of very sensitive detectors near the head. Conventional systems look like something like this, which might remind of like a old-fashioned hair dryer. So where the sensors are placed inside this dewar here. And we can measure the magnetic fields outside the head. By using some source localization methods, some mathematical projection, we can take the magnetic field data and turn it into an image of current density changes in the brain when a person undertakes a task And some examples of the better spatial resolution that MEG gives us compared to EEG, for example. So in these images, they show the brain responses to finger movements. So subjects were asked to tap their index finger and also their little finger alternatively. And we can see, so these the regions in the brain controlling different digits in the hand are also spatially separated in the brain, and MEG can detect those differences in the brain. So it can localize in different regions of the motor cortex depending on what finger the subjects were moving, and that is so these regions are separated by a few millimeters. So MEG can have information about those very close positions in the brain. As I mentioned at the beginning, epilepsy is probably the MEG biggest clinical use is probably for epilepsy. MEG can be used to localize these regions of abnormal brain activity, and surgeons can plan their where to resect these areas in the brain with really good spatial accuracy. Also I mentioned schizophrenia. MEG has already started to show differences in brain activity when comparing healthy subjects as opposed to patients with schizophrenia. So in this example here, so these are the typical graphs that we look at in MEG, where we have in the vertical axis frequency response, and in the horizontal axis we represent time. So when subjects are asked to move their finger for 2 seconds, we can see a decrease shown here in blue, a decrease in amplitude of frequencies around this range of 20 hertz or so, followed by an increase in amplitude after the movement, and then going back to some sort of baseline. And this is in healthy subjects. This is what we expect from a healthy brain. But we can compare it to patients with schizophrenia. I can go back and forth so you can see how we now don't see that response after the finger movement. So MEG can already give us these markers of differences in brain and different patient groups. But what is it that why is MEG not being that used widely? What is holding it back? So the main challenge of MEG is that we're measuring really, really small magnetic fields. So on the order of femtotesla, which is 1 billion times smaller than the Earth's magnetic field. So, for example, an MRI scanner is a few Tesla magnetic field strength. So this is where the brain signal is. So very, very small fields. So MEG has sometimes been referred to as technology that is like finding a needle in a haystack, and these MEG systems have to be placed inside a magnetically shielded room. So these rooms are made of high permeability metals that deflect sources of magnetic field. So from magnetic field from the Earth to start with, but also magnetic fields that are coming from cars passing by, trains, the electronic equipment around the lab, and the field gets reduced a few 3 to 4 orders of magnitude with these enclosed rooms. Also talking about the MEG hardware and why this is a limitation. So already MEG devices, conventional systems, are based on quantum technology. They consist of superconducting quantum interference devices called SQUIDs, and these are very sensitive magnetic field detectors. So this is, I showed a few pictures of what the system looks like. And there's usually around 300 of these placed inside a dewar of liquid helium to reach this superconducting state needed. And patients, participants insert their head in it. So this is an adult version of the system, a baby version of the system. But this translates into cryogenic cooling, means that the sensors are a long way from the head because you need to keep an insulating layer because of the cryogenic temperatures, and this results in reducing signal to noise, because we know that magnetic fields decrease with distance, so we need to be as close as possible. The one-size-fits-all arrangement of the systems, the fixed position of the sensors, means that the brain-to-sensor distance will be different for an adult than a children. So scanning babies and children is even more challenging. And also having people, in order to do scanning, you have to have people keeping very, very still. Movements larger than 5 millimeters are not tolerable. So this also becomes a challenge for some subject groups, like patients that cannot keep still, or children. And also this means that the available technology that is out there to do more naturalistic neuroscience experiments requires head movements, and these are not compatible with MEG devices as they stand. Also, liquid helium means that MEG scanners are very expensive to buy and maintain. They're about £2 million a system like this. So this has limited really the use of MEG, and also the translation into the clinical setting. So now I'm jumping on to the recent technology, optically pumped magnetometers. So a new type of sensor that has been around for a few decades now, but so advances in quantum technologies has seen the development of these sensors. They have a similar performance to SQUID, but it has the added advantage that they don't need cryogenic cooling. And there have been many different advances around the different atomic physics labs around the world. And there are many different versions of the sensors, but it has been really, they have seen a huge improvement in reducing the size of these and finally becoming a device that you can just hold in your hand. And how they compare with SQUIDs? Well, as I said, in terms of sensitivity, they are able to measure magnetic fields from the brain. Depends on the size of the OPM. You get a different sensitivity profile, but comparable to current SQUID MEG systems. In terms of bandwidth, it's a bit limited in OPMs, but for measuring the magnetic fields from the brain, we're usually looking at frequencies between 1 and 100. So this is enough for measuring, for using these sensors for MEG. Obviously, conventional SQUID MEG systems are well established. They're multi-channel. There are about 300 channels. And OPM systems are currently being developed, and we're around the 50 channel systems covering the whole head. But the advantage is that the distance from the scalp to the sensor it's reduced by a lot. So you are in a conventional system, you're a few centimeters away from a sensor. But these sensors, if you put them right on the head, you can get as close as 4-5 millimeters. The flexible, because they are independent units, it means that they add this flexibility, so you can put them in areas where you were struggling before to get signal, or you can put them around the room to regress magnetic interference. Basically, they're not limited by the dewar size as before, and obviously they don't depend on liquid helium. So a few years ago, due to the excitement of these OPMs, these quantum sensors coming away from tabletop lab setting into commercialized units, we were thinking, can MEG stop being an expensive, restrictive, big device and instead become something that can be worn like a hat, like a helmet, and we can put these sensors all around the head. So I'm gonna go through the journey that we embarked on a few years ago and how this has led to the formation of Serica Magnetics. So a few years ago, we started doing this, just some simulation work to quantify what the advantages would be of bringing sensors as close as possible to the head. And this leads to an improvement, overall improvement of fivefold improvement in sensitivity all around the brain. And it was in 2017 when the first commercializable commercial sensor from Q-Spin, a company in Colorado, we did the first measurements to compare with cryogenic system, showing that expected increase in signal. So the OPM signal here in blue showing 4 times higher magnitude compared to a cryogenic device. Nevertheless, this was only with one sensor, and you see here the subject was lying down, the helmet was clamped into the bed, so they couldn't really move. So apart from the improvement in sensitivity, there was not really improvement in terms of scanning environment. But it was in 2018 when we did the first demonstration of a wearable OPM array. But the main problem that we came across was, if we put the sensors on the head, can we just move freely? Well, the answer is no, because the OPMs have very limited dynamic range, about 1.5 nanotesla. So as you see from these from the video, I'll play it again. When the person takes a drink and the head therefore moves, the sensors sense this change in magnetic field, and they go out of their dynamic range and become and stop. You lose that data there. So we can place some extra compensation coils, some electromagnetic coils, to generate magnetic fields that are equal and opposite to those in the magnetically shielded room. Niall Holmes from our lab, he designed and built a set of biplanar coils placed either side of the subject, allowing easy access, to make these uniform, to make these wire paths that create uniform fields and spatial gradients. So these designs were adapted from MRI grading coil design methods. And interestingly, Sir Peter Mansfield his work in this area gave him he was awarded with the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2003. So with these coils, we can reduce the remnant magnetic field from about 30 nanotesla to a few hundred picotesla, and this allows the sensors to keep working even when when the subject is moving their head. As we can see in this video here, we demonstrated for the first time a subject batting a ball on a bat while having their MEG signals measured and showing reconstruction to the area of the brain responsible for that hand and arm movement with the expected response, oscillatory response. So that was the first demonstration of wearable MEG. We can also, so these coils can also be used for dynamic nulling. So in areas where the magnetic fields are a bit more challenging to control, like this is a diagram, a graph showing magnetic field changes in London. So the lab there is quite close to the underground, and that means that the sensors, they see these changes in field whenever there's an underground train passing by. But these coils can help with this compensating for these magnetic field changes. So that was 2018, and after that we then, thanks to these coils that allow us to have a subject sat and moving their head freely, we started looking at applications that we were not able to do before in conventional systems, like scanning children, for example. So we showed that we could measure brain activity from two-year-old and 5-year-old while watching their favorite program in the lab, and sat on their mother's lap whilst performing a sensory task. And this was something unimaginable with conventional MEG, and very exciting. So around the same time, we were also exploring other ways of doing neuroscience experiments. So virtual reality can help creating this immersive environment, but they usually require subjects to move their head. So OPM MEG can help with this, and we were able to reconstruct activity in the visual cortex depending on where the subject was leaning to. And this is something that in conventional MEG would just be an image changing on the screen, but in here it's the subject moving in order to see the changes. And by the end of 2019, luckily for us, the development in OPMs kept going forward, and they were reduced in size and weight. So that means that we can put them like an EEG cap around the head. And that's one of the first things we did to do simultaneously OPM MEG and an EEG measurements. And just to check that neither the OPMs nor the EEG system would be affected by each other. And we saw the expected response. This was, again, a simple task of moving a finger. So there's similar oscillatory changes in both techniques. But we also saw that EEG is 10 times more susceptible to muscle artifacts compared to OPM MEG. So if you have a person moving freely, this will the muscles from the neck and the head, whenever there's movement, this will affect the EEG signal much more than it will do the MEG signal. And finally, this is where we are now with 50 channel OPM MEG system, whole head coverage. So the system has been changing a lot in the past years, and these are some pictures of the current system. We have a dedicated we've been working closely with magnetic shields, and they manufactured this OPM dedicated room where the magnetic field, the remnant magnetic field, is inside is already an order of magnitude better than conventional rooms where conventional MEG systems are placed in. And we've been looking at, well, many of the photos that I've been showing in the past slides were using this type of helmets, which are subject-specific 3D printed casts. So these are based on a subject's MRI. So that gives you the best case scenario where you know exactly where a sensor is with respect to the brain of the person. And this is really important in MEG because you need to do that reconstruction of magnetic fields outside the head into current density in the brain. But as I showed for the kids, scanning kids, we used a modified bike helmet, so something a bit less probably scary for kids, something they're more used to put on. And lately, we've been looking at other ways of mounting sensors, so flexible caps like in an EEG setup, but also looking at 3D printed, but instead of subject-specific, being a generic helmet. So the idea with this is that you can get a few sizes for 2-year-olds, 8-year-olds, and then an adult size, where you have very good knowledge of where the sensor is, the orientation of the sensor, but one helmet can fit many people instead of having to build one for each person. But nevertheless, comparing the current system that we have, so 50 channel OPM MEG, comparing with established cryogenic MEG, gives us very comparable results. Doing this, so all the different lines are for repeated experiments. So we're constantly testing, comparing with the current conventional technology, and we get very repeatable results, reconstructing it at different parts of the brain. So it was a motor and visual task performed in a couple of subjects, but very comparable results between the conventional and the 50 channel OPM system. So an OPM MEG system gives us better, if not so comparable, if not better performance to the cryogenic, with the added advantage that you can freely sit and be scanned without having to be restricted. So moving on to some more applications that we've been looking at with the whole head system. So connectivity is a very important topic in MEG, in neuroscience, because we know that brain regions don't work in isolation. We want to know how different regions communicate with each other, and also how the brain communicates with the rest of the body. So if we have two different regions and we look at the relationship, how they correlate, this allows us to understand, we can investigate into healthy brain function, but also dysfunction. And this is something that we've looked at very recently for the first time with OPMs, and with just, sorry, it's a very busy slide, but just I will try to guide you through it. Basically comparing the 50 channel OPM system with a conventional MEG. they both give us very similar results. They pop out the same brain regions, the same connections between brain regions. And interestingly, we can see subject differences. So in here we have subject 1 and subject 2, and the OPM and cryogenic pick up the same connections, and also pick up those subject differences, which is really, really encouraging for an OPM MEG system based on just 50 tunnels compared to hundreds of the conventional. Another application, so as I mentioned before, the wearability of MEG now enables us to look at other experiments, other new neuroscience experiments to respond to neuroscientific questions that we couldn't do before with MEG. And one example for is motor learning. So we can use OPM MEG to investigate how we learn new skills, like for example playing chords in an instrument. And this requires very large movements of the head and rotation in order to look down and look at the instrument and see what chords you're playing. And we already can see some differences between left and right hemispheres. So the right motor cortex is controlling the left hand, that is placing the fingers on the ukulele, on the different strings, and the left motor cortex is controlling the right hand, the right wrist and an arm that is strumming the chords. So very, very encouraging for OPM MEG. Another application, brain-computer interfaces. So brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, they use the neuronal signals to interact with computers, with prosthetic limbs. So this was a project in collaboration with KU Leuven, in which we developed a sort of mind speller BCI that could allow patients with locked-in syndrome to type words into a keyboard, a virtual keyboard, by simply shifting their gaze. This so BCIs require real-time analysis and single trial events, so very high quality data. And if this works, yes, that's this is just a video showing how this worked. So 3x3 grid with different characters and letters on the screen. The subject was wearing the OPM device, and they had to gaze at the different words, letters, depending on what they had to spell at the top there. So its character is displayed at certain frequency and phase, and therefore then that is picked up by the sensors, and decoding which frequencies are picked up, then the BCI knows which letter they were gazing at. And jumping onto something very different to what I've been talking about, but this flexibility of OPMs gives us also gives us now many different applications, not only looking at brain magnetic fields coming from the brain. So we can start to look at magnetic fields coming from the heart, from the muscles, from the spine, and even from fetal signals. So this is something that we've recently started to look at placing OPMs on pregnant women and looking at differentiating between the maternal heart, which is obviously much higher in magnitude, but we can pick up fetal heart signals with OPMs and monitor the fetal heart rate as a marker of fetal well-being. So OPMs open up now different avenues for measuring magnetic fields from the body. But these are not only, so I've shown some of the applications where OPMs have started to play some part, but there are many other applications, like I mentioned, scanning subjects that struggle to keep still. They cannot be scanned in conventional MEG systems or MRI, like Tourette's or Parkinson's. We can scan babies to understand more about the brain development. Different types of, again, experimental setups like driving simulators and looking how the brain and the body, so the feet and hands, how they communicate with each other, and brain-computer interfaces, as I mentioned. But these are only a few, but there are lots of different applications around the neuroscience and neurology area that MEG can start to play a big part if becomes more accessible for researchers all around the world and clinical settings. And this brings me to talk about circumagnetics as it was created by in response to a great interest from across the world to be able to access OPM MEG technology. So CERCA is a joint venture between the University of Nottingham and Magnetic Shields Limited, and it was established in July last year, but launched in December 2020. And currently there are confirmed orders to provide imaging solutions to Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto and Young Epilepsy in Kent in England. And the plan for CERCA is to sell these integrated neuroimaging solutions. And also I should point out that we're currently recruiting, so you can feel free to look at the CERCA Magnetic website, but also the posts are on LinkedIn and Indeed as well. So just to finalize, just finish the talk. Thanks to this new generation of sensors, of quantum magnetic field sensors, have enabled MEG to become a wearable technology, and this gives high fidelity brain, direct measurement of brain activity while subjects are not constrained, and it has the potential to give this information across the lifespan, scanning from babies to adults, and also opens up new avenues, new types of experiments in both the neuroscience field, but also in clinical applications. And I want to finish by thanking all my collaborators, colleagues, and friends that have made all of these possible. So, and also thank all of you for listening.
Elena, thank you so much. I'm so glad I invited you to come and talk. This is fascinating. I'm afraid we're completely out of time, So if you have questions for Elena, please message her on the platform and she will get back to you. I appreciate your time, and I really wish you the best of luck for this technology because it's going to be transformative. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.